Unit 1. Concept of Synoptic Gospels. Concept of Synoptic Gospels. In this unit, we shall examine the term synoptic. Thereafter, we shall examine the concept of gospel. Secondly, by the end of this interaction, we should be able to explain the date, the authorship, place, and purpose of composition of the Gospel of Matthew, the Gospel of Mark, and the Gospel of Luke. Now, the concept of Synoptic Gospels. The term synoptic is derived from syn, S-Y-N, which means with, W-I-T-H, or together, and optos, O-P-T-O-S, which means seen, S-W-E-I-N-G, as in optic, meaning that these three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are similar, or that they see things in much the same way, according to Source 1999. The word gospel comes from the Old English word gospel, G-O-D-S-P-E-L, which means God's or good story. It is derived from the Greek word evangelion, E-U-A-N-G-E-L-I-O-N, that is, good news. Good news. The good news refers to the Son of God. In other words, the news is a good one because the Son of God is the one who died that we might not perish but have eternal life. John chapter 3 verse 16. John chapter 3 verse 16. Next, the authorship, date, place, and purpose of composition of the Gospel according to St. Matthew. Author. According to Dunnett, 2002, page 13, he contended that Matthew was one of the original disciples of Christ who wrote the first book in the New Testament. He was known as Levi, the publican who collected tax in Palestine until he was called to follow Jesus. You find this in Matthew chapter 9 verse 9 and 10, Mark chapter 2 verse 14 and verse 15. When was the book of Matthew written and where? According to Hezemedia 2004, page 20, in a lecture note edited or entitled The Theology of the Synoptic Gospels, he believes that St. Matthew wrote in Palestine between 80 and 85 AD. He affirmed that St. Matthew, as an apostle, based his work, written gospel, on an eyewitness account. However, Hezemedia maintained that most modern scholars claim that Matthew drew his write-up from Mark and Q source. It should be noted that Matthew had a peculiar source known as M source. Why was Matthew written, or rather the component of the Gospel according to St. Matthew? Matthew addressed his Gospel primarily to Jewish readers. He presented Jesus as the Messiah, the King of the Jews. This is seen in such passages as his genealogy, Matthew chapter 1 verse 1 to 17, the visit of the Magi, Matthew chapter 2 verse 1 to 12, his entry into Jerusalem, Matthew 21 verse 5, the judgment of the nations, Matthew 25 verse 31 to 46, and in common with the other Gospels, the superscription over the cross, Matthew 27 verse 37. The book of Matthew has much to say concerning the kingdom of heaven. The book equally serves as the bridge between the Old and the New Testaments, thus linking together the prophecies of the coming Messiah with the fulfillment of the prophecy in the person of the Lord Jesus. Matthew chapter 1 verse 22 and 23, chapter 2 verse 15 and 17. Prominent discourses of Jesus Christ is easily observed in Matthew, namely, that is, these are major discourses to be noted as contained in the Gospel according to St. Matthew. Number 1, the Sermon on the Mount. We find this in Matthew chapter 5 verse 1 to chapter 7 verse 29. In other words, chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7 up to verse 29. The commission to the 12. Find this in Matthew chapter 10 verse 1 to 42. The third discourses, or one of the discourses, the parables of the kingdom, Matthew chapter 13 verse 1 to 53. The fourth discourse, the meaning of greatness and forgiveness, Matthew chapter 18 verse 1 to 35. And the fifth major discourses as contained in the Gospel according to St. Matthew, the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24 verse 1 to 51 and chapter 25 verse 1 to 46. The Gospel according to St. Matthew may be divided into 8 segments as follows: the introduction of the King, the demands of the King, the deeds of the King, the program of the King, the destiny of the King, the problems of the King, the death and resurrection of the King, and the final commission by the King. Now we move to the Gospel according to St. Matthew. Who wrote the Gospel according to St. Matthew? When was it written and where? And why was it written? Author. Quite in contrast to Matthew, Mark was not one of the original or direct disciples of Jesus Christ, according to Donnet 2002 page 15. In his book entitled New Testament Survey, Matthew to Revelation, Donnet holds the view that Mark was a native of Jerusalem, Acts chapter 12 verse 12, a companion of Simon Peter, 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 13, and the cousin of Barnabas, Colossians chapter 4 verse 10, who in turn was a close associate of Paul and the Jerusalem apostles. In AD 112, Papias, one of the church fathers, 60